30 million. 30 million is just a number to you, but when you put faces to those facts, suddenly it becomes real. This is the number of people caught up in sex trafficking in the world today. You might say, yeah, but that's the world. There's a lot of people in the world, which is true. In the most recent census, I found that there are a little over 7 billion people in the world, and counting. So let's take it a little closer to home. We do know that there's anywhere between 14,000 and 17,000 people trafficked into the U.S. each year. And in the U.S., there's anywhere between 100,000 and 300,000 girls at risk of being trafficked yearly. You might have caught that I said people rather than women, although it's common belief that all human trafficking involves women. This is not true. Human trafficking is by definition the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force or fraud for the purpose of subjecting to involuntary servitude, debt bondage, or slavery. The best way that I can explain this is saying that human trafficking is this broad thing that one person has control of another person and they trick them into doing something that they want them to do, whether that be labor or sex or whatever. And from that, we know that we have labor trafficking, which is most commonly found in diverse labor settings such as domestic work, small businesses, large firms, and factories. Many immigrants and foreigners will come looking for work, and they'll buy into the false hope that traffickers provide, and once they're under their control, they're just forced to stay there and keep working. And that's how they get caught from that. And then on the other hand, you have sex trafficking, which is the act of giving or receiving anything of value, money, drugs, shelter, clothes, food, etc., to any person in exchange for any kind of sexual act. And branching off of that, I'd like to just point out that sex trafficking isn't just sex. It's any kind of exploitation of a minor. It's forcing someone to prostitution, subjecting victims to slavery or involuntary servitude, and most prominent, which might be a little surprising to some people, is compelling victims to commit sex acts for the purpose of creating pornography. And this is where I think that we get the misconception that sex trafficking doesn't really happen in the United States. Although pimps and prostitutes are a very real problem, it's not the only thing that sex trafficking defines. Just recently, Messiah invited Jen Sprague to speak of her personal childhood experiences in sex trafficking, and she has also given me permission to share her story today. So, she, along with her sister, cousin, and many other neighborhood children, were trafficked by their neighbor. From the age of 6 years old, Jen was very unaware of what was actually going on. All these kids knew was that by accepting the toys, food, and money from this man, they had entered an agreement. This is kind of how traffickers will manipulate you into feeling like that it's you agreeing to do something, or that you are consenting into this. So it's kind of a very deceitful thing. Knowing it was wrong, the children made a pact to never tell, and when Jen always made it back in time for dinner, her mother never really had any reason to suspect anything. Jen's mother passed away a few years ago, still never knowing. Human trafficking is the third largest international crime. This falls behind illegal drugs and arms trafficking, generating roughly $32 billion a year. This is no small crime. We know that according to the U.S. Department of Justice, that the average age of entry into prostitution in the U.S. is around 13 or 14 years old. That's pretty young. And we know that from Jen's story, kids are as young as 5 or 6 years old. Traffickers are well-rehearsed in false promises, and a child of that age is oftentimes naive enough to fall for these tricks. And this is where we find the 259% increase from the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline. Since 2008, they have had over 72,000 interactions. And I would just like to leave you with this. We abolished slavery in 1865. We all agreed then and now that it was a terrible, horrific thing to do, and abolishing it was the right thing to do. If this is all true, why do we not feel the same for sex slavery?